All right, so this is a dozen cool things you can do with PhpStorm. PhpStorm is an IDE. It's been around actually for quite a while, at least IntelliJ, which is based, PhpStorm is based off that, has been around since the late 90s, I think. So this is just cool things that I do to use PhpStorm. This is me. I shamelessly stole pictures from Fox Valley's website. So admittedly, that picture, that was me taken a few weeks ago before the beard. I'm Evil EHK on Drupal.org. I'm also on Drupal Stack Exchange. I have a goal to try and get over 1,000 reputation points. I'm not even close, but that's my goal. I've been a Java developer for about 15 years. That's actually when I started using IntelliJ, which is another JetBrains product. Then I stopped for a while and used Eclipse, and was actually pretty happy with that until I started using PhpStorm again and realized what I missed. I've been doing Drupal since 2006, which, wow, it's 8 years. Started with Drupal 5.1. And I'm a lead developer at Breakthrough Technologies. Breakthrough, they gave me a couple of hours last week to work on these slides. So I'm going to give them a quick elevator pitch. They're awesome to work with. They're a platinum level sponsor of this midcamp and a lot of others. They sponsor DrupalCon. They pay overtime. And they're looking to hire. So if you know what this means, send us your resume. we have a table and we have flyers all over the place. I completely stole this from a presentation on scaling Drupal horizontally by Vladimir. It was a great presentation.
I don't know what that means.
If you thought Drupalisms were bad, this is, I guess, an AWS-ism. All right, so PhpStorm. One of the Drupal podcasts I listen to is Drupal Easy, and at the end they ask their host, their guest, what is your development environment? And for some reason, I always love that question. So I'm curious to know how many people here, what your development environment is like. So how many people use a text editor like Vim or Sublime? Okay. How many people use PhpStorm? All right. And how many people use any other IDE other than PhpStorm? Okay. I'm going to ask that question at the end of class, and if there's a percentage. Most people use something like VI or Sublime.
And not PhpStorm.
And not PhpStorm.
Does anyone use anything else?
No. Well, one person sort of. No?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so that's based on Eclipse. Sure. So PhpStorm, I say the 1% because there is a lot. There are a lot of features, and I'm only scratching the surface. I feel like I only know probably 1% of what you could actually do with PhpStorm, and most of that I learned in the past couple days. So.
Nice. Nothing like teaching.
Yeah. So. At the end of class, if I miss something that you use all the time, you think is cool, or if I'm doing something totally wrong, like using arg1, you could call me out on it. I won't be mad. Frederick suggested that you shouldn't say you're doing it wrong, but I won't be upset. That's OK. So what is PhpStorm? It's an IDE. And these are just some tasks that a typical IDE could handle. So it's a code editor. It provides code completion. It also provides formatting, so it automatically formats, and you could make that format to Drupal coding standards. It's easy to refactor file names, variables, methods. You do a refactor, it searches for its uses. It'll change every single file that references it, including comments if you tell it to. You can integrate a code sniffer, so it'll basically tell you if your code smells. Provides a lot of easy code search and navigation. And I forgot to include a link for it, but based on the computer you have, they have a a PDF file of all the commands you could use on a Mac or a PC or on Unix. That's really, really helpful because there's a lot. And then every time you start PhpStorm up, it has a very useful, well, it has a tip of the day, usually telling you about a keyboard shortcut. So I always read that tip of the day. And if it sounds like something I may use, even if I don't need it right now, I'll practice using it just so I remember it. So I think probably half of the keyboard shortcuts I know from PhpStorm has been from the tip of the day. It also provides support for debugging and profiling. PhpStorm supports Xdebug and XenDebugger. It could also do remote debugging, so you could debug when your application is actually on a remote server. Provides conditional breakpoints, so you could say stop here only when these conditions are true. It provides bookmarklets, which is basically like a bookmark on your browser to start debugging or profiling. And then it's also a tool that if you're using the profiling, you could actually read the profiling files. Usually you need another program to do that. PhpStorm is based on another application called WebStorm, which is basically it's an HTML, CSS, JavaScript editor. So you have all of those features within PhpStorm. It's a JavaScript debugger, which honestly I've never used. I find the browser debugging to be more than sufficient. And it has file watchers to automatically compile. If you're using a CSS processor or JavaScript thing like CoffeeScript, it'll tell that you're using it, and it'll automatically compile it for you as you change. So to summarize, it contains a code editor. And here's kind of where it differs from, say, a regular text editor. There's version control integration, so it's like a Git client where you could do branch and commit comparisons. It's a file compare utility. It provides a way to connect to a database and run SQL statements against it, so it's a database client. It has a built-in REST client. You could create UML diagrams just by right-clicking and saying diagram, and then you could dive into the definitions of what you're looking at, see its parents, see what implements it. And it's also a FTP client to a remote host. So you could say that you're deploying from this remote host, and then you could compare your local files to what's on the remote. You could drag them down, push them up, and again, a lot more. So let's start with the dozen cool things. One of the things that I use it the most for is debugging. Step debugging is really an extremely important tool for a developer. Provides much more insight than, say, DPM or KPR statements. Does anyone debug their code that way with print R or DPM? So this provides a lot more details. I've actually seen a lot of DPM files checked into the repository. So more times than I've seen a :WQ, I'll see a DPM. Thank you, Doug Van, VI guy right there. So PhpStorm offers zero config debugging, is what they call it. So if you're having trouble setting up debugging in PhpStorm, it's possible you're just trying too hard. Really, all you do is you hit this button. It looks like a phone. You click it, and then you're debugging. But it's not really zero config, because it may be zero config in PhpStorm, but you have to configure PHP to use Xdebug, and you have to tell your browser to initiate a debugging session. So to enable Xdebug on a Mac, there's a bundled PHP file. It's actually already there. You just go to the end of the file. It's commented out, and you just uncomment it and add Xdebug remote enable equal 1. Then restart, and then PHP should be good to go. You could also do remote debugging. So if you're off a server, you could set that server to do remote debugging, and then your PhpStorm will read it. So the difference is here, all we're doing is one line, remote enable equals 1. And there's some default xdebug variables like localhost, or I'm sorry, xdebug remote host, which equals localhost. So it defaults to localhost, which is your computer. But when you're remote, localhost is not your computer. So you enable that connect back. It will look at your IP address and connect to your IP address, which is useful if you have multiple developers working on it. So xdebug also becomes bundled with a lot of popular distributions. On Acura Dev Desktop, you just edit the file here, and on comment, on MAMP, you just click a button, restart, and it's there. XAMPP, for any Windows users out there, also the same thing. It comes bundled, so you just have to uncomment it. XAMPP also includes a lot of the xdebug options that you could use and explains them, so it's actually pretty nice. And then you have to tell your browser to use it. So there's a couple ways to do that. One is through these bookmarklets. And then you could also use browser extensions if you don't want to use the bookmarklets. So there's xdebug for Chrome, easiest xdebug for Firefox, and then Atala for Safari as well. So let's take a look at that, see what that looks like. So PhpStorm provides you with this marklet page where you could generate what they call your bookmarklets for xdebug and for XenDebugger. I'm using xdebug. This IDE key is fine. So I just click generate. And then it gives me these guys for future use. There's a start debugger, stop. Then you could debug just that one request. Then it has profiling too. And all you have to do is just take this guy, drag him up. Oh, I just lost my book boy. Yeah, you just drag them up, and you can place it right there. I'm also going to make sure that I have this enabled. I do, OK. OK, so now it actually comes time for that zero config that we've been talking about. So now you have your browser set up. You have PHP set up. So all you have to do is click on Listen to Debug Connections. And then you tell your browser you're going to initiate this debug session, and then you're debugging. So I also included this link. It's a great 8-step guide for zero-step debugging. And then once you set it up, you have to set breakpoints. And again, you could do conditional breakpoints too. So let's actually do that. So I'm going to go to a popular method. I'll go to entity load. Now my breakpoint set up there. It's hard to see here. That's the phone. Make sure it looks green there. So now it's listening. Okay, so I showed the bookmarklets. There were also extensions. I use this extension, and that's what this is right here. So I'm just going to click on it and click debug. And now when I refresh my screen, this is the problem with live demos. Let me double check that I have it on here. Restarting Apache, that would help. All right, take two. Okay, so entity load is called here. It sets up a breakpoint. I have, this is what I find is the most useful thing here. It has the call stack, so I know exactly how we got to that point. And I could scroll down, look at the variable names of each step of the way. And then I could step in and step out. So F7 to step in. I want to see what happens. What is the load function called for taxonomy? So I hit F7 to step into the next method. It's getting the controller for the taxonomy entity. It's returning that, and it's calling load. So now I'm in the taxonomy controller load method. Then I could resume. Comes back. So let's say I don't want it to stop at taxonomy vocabulary. I want it to stop when entity type is node. I could right-click, enter in my condition. And hit resume, and now it only stops there if entity type is node. So refresh this page. Oh, that says not equal node. Sorry, it's hard to see. I'll change that. So now when I refresh, the entity type should be node, and it is.
Do you always have to keep clicking back to that debugger tag? Every time you switch?
What do you mean?
So refresh the page again.
Okay, let me finish the debug. So yeah, once I'm done, I have to refresh to get it to debug
Well, yeah, you
again.
have to refresh here.
Yeah.
But then you switch back into PhpStorm. And when you switch back into PhpStorm, the console tab is active instead of the debugger tab. You probably don't even notice it. See right there. So you
Oh,
get
right,
here,
right.
And now you...
Yeah, see, that's interesting. Why is console even up there? It should be here.
Because when I tried starting to use PhpStorm about a month ago, and I just like, why do I have to keep clicking back to it?
I guess, you know, in some applications, there's going to be output, and you want to see that output. But yeah, you're right. It looked like it kept going back there. Okay, and then there's also the profiler. And to quote Mark Sonnenbaum, he says, profiling, it's awesome, and you should do it. And that's true. And you should do it. You should do it early on, because it's a great way to spot any performance problems before the real performance problems. And
can I ask you a question about the thing we were just doing, though?
Yeah.
The browser bookmarklets and the extensions and stuff, what are they for, and why do you need them, or are they just convenient?
They're for convenience, because usually when you're debugging something, you have to put this really long string at the end of the URL. So that's basically handling that for you. And that string looks like xdebug equals, we put in the IDE PhpStorm, so it'll say PhpStorm underscore and some hashtag that, you have to put in. So profiling, again, is a good way to find performance problems before the real issues. It's only the beginning because you're just testing your local computer, nothing else. So you're just one user. But PhpStorm provides support for it. Again, very similar to debug. To start it, you could use the JetBrains bookmarklet or a browser extension. To enable it, you set up these variables, xdebug profile enable equals 1. And then you could load the page. So let's do that too. So right now I'm enabling the extension. It looks like this. Actually, no, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. Xdebug remote enable equals 1. And now here I'm going to say profile. Let me go to a web page, set up specifically for this purpose. And we wait. That took a really long time to load. Actually, I want to show something real quick here, so you know why I'm going to the places I'm going to. All right, so PHP info, if you ever wonder what commands or what parameters you have available, it lists them here. So I find this pretty helpful. So for a profiler, it has all the variables. We did profile enable, which is 1. Has this output directory, which is var temp by default, and it has an output name. So I'm about to go to var temp, and I just wanted you to see why I was going there. I'm going to grab this. So here are my cache grind files. I'm actually going to use the first one when I made that request. So it looks like it's 5381. So in PhpStorm, I go into Tools, select Profile Snapshot. I'm going to go into var temp. I think I said 5381. And so now it's providing me a list of each of the files that were used, what called these files, and their time. I'm going to sort this by time. And see these other files and some methods called and the time that they take. What we're really looking for is something where this time lowered drastically. I'm wondering if this is the right file. Let me try 6053. No, that doesn't provide much. But this is the time that each method took. These were the functions that were called from within that method. So basically what you want to find is what lowered the time drastically, and then see what in that method lowered the time. So in our case, it was this guy here. I know that I actually didn't find the right file because it was pretty obvious when I tested this the other day. It said, sleep 10 seconds or 8 seconds, and that this method was its parent method. So it normally should tell you right where to go. There's also Drush support right out of the box. So Drush integration is available through what PhpStorm calls the command line tools. So you add a new command line tool via settings command line tool, and you press this plus icon. And then you activate the tool by hitting Control-Shift-X. And what's nice about this is okay, so this is Drush, where you add it. You give it the tool path. This is the plus sign that you click on to add it. And now, when I activate the command line tool with Control-Shift-X, I have autocomplete.
Do we still install Drush our usual way, and we're just putting the path to Drush in there?
Yes, yeah. So you install Drush. I did it through Composer. So when I added this, when I hit the plus sign, I went to my Composer path, told PhpStorm where to find Drush, and now it's aware of it, and it does autocomplete, which is pretty nice. PhpStorm also has a built-in Drupal integration. So to enable Drupal support, I like to do Command-Shift-A, which is find everything. And then you put in the root Drupal folder of your project, support 6 and 7. And then when you use, when you're in a module file and you're typing in the name of a hook, it will autocomplete it for you. It also provides some other things like a Drupal API search right in the context menu. So I'm going to go to my Fox Valley thing. If I start typing in the name of Form Alta, for example, I get all the hooks that are available. I hit Tab. It fills it in for me. It has all the arguments, including the reference variable. that ampersand. I could also go to its definition by clicking on the left gutter there. This is where hook form alter is. If I want the definition of it, I'm sorry. Other ways I could get to it is if I right click. Scroll up so we can see it. Maybe I'll go to menu here. It also tells me where it's called. So this module right here, it calls the hook menu in system and admin views as well. And I could go to it right there. So it also provides Drupal coding standards. It has a preset Drupal code, so you say, I'm using Drupal, so my spaces should be 2 spaces and not 4. You could reformat the file, and then you could also include a sniffer, so it tells you when your code is not following those standards. So I'm going to do another example to see that. So for the sniffer, to set that up, you select code sniffer. Again, I like to do the Control-Shift-A to find it. You do have to install. PHP Code Sniffer. I did that through Composer. And then you install the coder module, which has what's called the rule set for sniffer, so it knows what it's looking for. And then you tell PhpStorm about it. So basically, you put your code sniffer path here in this code sniffer setting. And then under PHP code sniffer validation, you enable it. And then in coding standard there, that is where you put in the Drupal coder rule set module. So let's take a look at that too. PHP code. So this is where I told it where my PHP code sniffer is. It's right there. And then under inspections is where I find the sniffer validation. This coding standard, you change that to custom. And then, so this is assuming you install the coder module, which adds this directory here. And that's what defines the definitions of how to sniff out bad code. So if we were to find, for example, a file that didn't meet coding standards, maybe not so hard to find if you look. Let's see. It's so much clearer on that screen. I should probably duplicate. If I look at bootstrap.include, I'm going to go ahead and click on code and then inspect code, which is going to run code sniffer against it. I'm just going to do this file. If this was attached to Git, one of the options would be only uncommitted files, or the current file, the whole project, or you could do a folder. So now it's analyzing the code, and it's giving me all of these things that's wrong with it. Unused, with Drupal, you'll actually find quite a bit of unused variables. Form state, for example, you see all the time. Undefined, you'll see that in in objects that you're referencing a method or property that it doesn't know. But my favorite one to go to is PHP. So here it's telling me that, hey, this one it's expecting 6. I found 5. This one shouldn't have parentheses around it. So one thing that would help with this a lot is if I did the reorganize code, it will reorganize it against Drupal standards. So I'm going to hit Command-Alt-L. It says reformat. I'm going to say yes, reformat it. And now I'm going to run this and see if that makes any changes. I think that says 21 items. If I rerun it, now it went down to 7 items. So that always helps. I like to run that first. So that's where the coding standards could help, and then Code Sniffer could help even further by providing this information.
What did you do? You reorganized it? What was that bit?
Yeah. So the command was Command-Shift-L to reorganize it. And it knew how to reorganize because so these are my project settings. And usually by default, let's say it was the default. Click on PHP. So by default, there's 4 spaces here, 8 spaces here. That's not really what we want. So we could go to Set From, select Language, and then select Drupal. And then it changes to Drupal's coding standard. So it changed the tab size, the indent. It defines the spacing here, wrapping and braces. So when I did that reformat, it reformatted my code to match this. Okay, we'll never have coffee if I don't speed this up. So number 6 is the Git integration. So PhpStorm has integration for a lot of VCS systems. Git is the one that I use the most. It's always fastest. I still actually use the command line because I find that that's faster. But where I do use PhpStorm for Git is to look at file history and comparisons. You could compare between branches. You could change from local to the current origin repository. You could see what changes are different. And you could check out other branches. So we just changed this bootstrap file. So you can see it changed here. The color is now blue, which means it's changed. It's blue here as well. And these blue marks here actually show all of the changes that I made. So if I click, it's saying this is what it was before. And now there's a space after that ampersand. And you could see all of your changes.
You just click on the blue thing and then it tells you the change right there?
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I think this file is really big, but if you have a smaller module file, you could actually see the changes in the left gutter. And then where I use Git, I could compare this with the latest repository branch to see all of the changes with this nice comparison tool. And I could revert them if I want. There's also I could compare with a different branch. Show the history is a feature I use a lot. Shows how this has changed. And then I could compare, say, 731 to 730. What's different there? Click on Compare, and it shows me the differences. It also provides YAML and Twig support. So if you've used Drupal 8 at all, it replaces the info files with YAML files, which I think stands for yet another markup language, but that's another discussion. And instead of using PHP template, it uses Twig. And PhpStorm offers plugins where it could actually be aware of what information needs to go in that YAML file. Because if you ever look at the YAML file, you have no idea what needs to go in there. So if you add these plugins, there's autocomplete, so you know what goes in there. The plugins are the Symfony 2 plugin, the Drupal Symfony 2 bridge, and PHP annotations. You actually just install the Drupal Symfony 2 bridge plugin, and that will also install Symfony 2 plugin. And then you could also do annotations. And then you enable the Symfony 2 plugin for the project. And then you have support. And I'll show what that looks like real quick. So I'm doing Command-Shift-A, which is find everything. I'm typing in plugins. I'm going to my plugin settings. When I first installed these plugins, I went into Browse Repository, and you could search them here. I'm going to search for Symfony. You find the Symfony 2 plugin here, the Drupal Support, Drupal Bridge, and then PHP annotations. And then you install them. And then the next step was to enable it for your project. I think I have it enabled here. Which is right here under plugin. Yeah, under my project settings. OK, so it's not enabled for this project. Let's see which one. Oh, it's enabled for Drupal 8. It wouldn't be enabled for Drupal 7. All right, so let me find go to info file, go to the top here. If I start typing in, it'll give me all the options that are available to me. And then it also recognizes your route names as well. So a lot of times in Drupal 8, you'll see route name equals, I don't know, node.page. So if I do a search for route name, just find a random one here.
Do you have to put the quotes around the search?
I did because I wanted to find just route name with the quotes, but you don't have to. So it actually looked for those quotes too. So now it's giving me a list of all of the route names that are available. I can say views. There's all the views. Pick one. Right? I hit Control Space.
Control Space.
Yeah, for autocomplete. Sometimes if there's a lot, you have to hit Control Space to get autocomplete on. Otherwise, it comes on automatically. And then I could even hit Command and go to that definition. So I don't have to go searching to see what's going on there. I just go to that definition, I see the path, all those requirements and things, which is neat. Same thing with Twig. There's auto-completion with Twig. I'm going to skip that for time. And there's also a tool to test your RESTful web services. So to test a service, obviously you need to make sure the web service is running if it belongs to you. You select your request method, whether it's a GET, a POST, a patch, or whatever. You provide a URL, a path, header data. And then it also allows you to do some advanced features as well. You could send a file in your request. You could do basic authentication. And you could do proxies. And you could also debug your web service, too. All right, so the tool is here, test RESTful web service. And you put in the URL here. I have REST on this page, so I'm just going to REST WS. So I'm just going to say Drupal 7.dev. Path is going to be node 25 JSON. This is the GET request. Again, if I wanted to do some advanced features, I could include a file with my request, which is right here, file to use. And these options here will allow me to do things like send off the authentication, which is nice, and then you just hit play to see your request. So this was the output, obviously. I could format that in JSON. I think that's the JSON file. So it shows it to me in this new window in a formatted JSON, which is nice. And then to debug it, you go to this Edit Configurations here. And you pick a new configuration, and what you want to use is PHP HTTP request. So I use that, and basically I put in exactly what I put in before. Yeah, I'm going to cancel all of that. And, so basically, when you, I think I have it set up here. Okay. So I set up the breakpoint. So it's basically it's debugging my request. That's the breakpoint I set up from earlier. And stop it, move on.
Checking people because
okay.
The next at 2:45.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to speed through this. I'm sorry. So there's also composer dependencies. You could have Drupal 8 manage your libraries that you add. Basically, the way to do this is you install Composer, and then you tell PHPStorm where Composer lives, which is kind of a habit that we're seeing a lot. You install PHPUnit. You tell it where it lives. You install Drush Coder. You tell it where it lives. Then you do init composer, and it creates a stub composer JSON for you. It does that in Drupal's root directory. And then when you right-click on a project, you could add a dependency. And then it's an auto search against packagist. I like to do the command line tool as well. But really, I don't use that because you wouldn't expect to see that in Drupal. You expect to see it in Sites All vendor. So to do that, I like to use Composer Manager, which will put your composer in public composer file. And then you basically you just use that. You could use PHPStorm to add libraries to that. And then there's also PHPUnit Integration. So again, you tell PhpStorm where the PHP unit exists. I had a whole example where I used the composer autoload to load in PHPUnit, but I don't think we'll have time for that. And then similar to how we did a new web service, you do a new PHP unit. You give it the name. Because you did composer and with PHPUnit, you have this class autofilled in your name, so it creates a class for you, and then you could run it.
I'll have a live demo with that for the next one.
We'll have a live demo now. I guess we have time, right? We got 9 minutes. OK. So assuming all that composer stuff is done, I'm going to File, New. I'm going to PHPUnit Test. So if I type in test case, I give it a name. I can name it something else. I don't like to use the namespace. It seems to screw things up. It auto-generates this file for me. I'm actually going to copy in some code here. It would help if I could actually read that. OK, so this is the test. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm going to open up Firefox. It's going to load my page. It's going to log in, and then it's going to confirm that the user menu exists. I'm using Selenium, by the way, and a PHP unit test from Facebook. So to run the test, add configuration. Select my file. Now the class is correct. Say OK. And then I could hit the play button. It's running. It's opening up Firefox for me. And it says, hey, the test failed. So to see what happened, why it failed, I could set up a breakpoint. Instead of hitting the play button, I'd hit debug. And now when it runs, as you can see this opening and doing thing, it'll stop at that breakpoint. And I have this available to me. And I could step through, logs in. It's looking to see if the secondary menu links exists. And then it's looking for assert false. But that's going to say, hey, this is true. But it's not a Boolean true, so it's going to fail. So I'm going to comment that out. I should probably be using that instead. Sorry, I cannot see it. Okay, so that's going to fail. Now I'm going to run it again. This time it logs in. It sees the secondary menu, and it passes. And I get this, this green light over here. All right, so that, sorry, that went really long. So finally, in the last, just some tips and tricks. Some my favorite commands that I used. Ship command O takes you to any file buried deep within your project. You could do shortcuts to get the path. You could use camel case. So if you did a search for like ST, you'll get a simple test class. Alt command O finds any symbol. So if you're looking for a function anywhere in your project, you just do Alt command O, and you could search for your function name. Command Shift A, I use that throughout, which is basically find all the things. So here, just to search for Drupal, it finds Drupal support in the settings. Conditional breakpoints, which we saw. And PhpStorm 8 actually came out this week. I almost updated just before this class. I'm like, that's a bad idea. But these are some of the new features. PSR 0 and 4 supports the namespacing for PSR, has WordPress support, remote PHP support, Angular, Grunt Runner, something called Spy.js, which I thought was funny when Frederick mentioned in his keynote that probably some JavaScript library just came out that you don't know of. Maybe it's that one. Finally, some resources. JetBrains has really good tutorials, hands-on materials. It has video on YouTube. This last one here is from Jeffrey from Laravel fame. He does these Laracasts, which is mostly about Laravel. But he uses PhpStorm, and he did this whole thing on how he uses PhpStorm. And it's free. It's one of the ones that are free. So that's it.